this is Marina from Darkstar Astrology, bringing you the full moon lunar eclipse on the 27th of July, and it falls at 4 degrees of Aquarius, and it also makes a very striking T-square with Mars square Uranus. So this eclipse is going to be conjunct the fixed star Darhib in the head of the goat and Jedi, which are the two stars in the goat's horns. It speaks of a youthful tendency to live in the moment and become a slave to Venus and her tempting baubles. So when we're young, we want to gorge on all the sweets in the shop without thinking of the consequences. But when we're older, we learn the value of deferred gratification. So this eclipse makes a promise that if you do indeed make a sacrifice, then you shall be handsomely rewarded. So the T-square is activated by the lunar eclipse, and it's really sitting on a knife edge. Events occur that are just downright peculiar. The tension can push people to do something really reckless, and the risk of accidents is very high. Help is at hand with the mature and modulating trine from Saturn. Age and wisdom are the only way to rein in the fast, furious and rebellious nature of Mars square Uranus. So hopefully Saturn can tactfully steer the raw, impetuous energy of this square into something constructive. And squares are pretty constructive anyway. But do remember to put on your safety goggles. So the needy embryonic moon is not comfortable in a decan that is so much about cutting the umbilical cord to freedom. It is also one that will tend to rebel against its mother country and feel at odds in whatever home they find themselves. The moon here is constantly searching for the promised land, but rarely finds it. So this lunar eclipse then is going to be really idealistic, so much so that it finds squaring its high expectations with earthly domestic reality extremely hard. However, by the end of the month, any alienation that is felt matures into great self-sufficiency. The ability to look after oneself then is in turn bestowed upon the various waifs and strays that this lunar eclipse will be attracting. So at this time, we might find ourselves providing temporary accommodation for those making difficult life transitions. A cosmic home is also found amongst other outsiders. So the meaning of a lunar eclipse in general is that it's really a super menstrual wolf howler version of a full moon, and it will do a great job of purging and releasing things from our lives that no longer serve our higher selves. The bright light of the sun throws a spotlight on our subconscious to illuminate any issues within our primary relationships that have been festering there since the previous solar eclipse. So with the lunar eclipse, the Earth comes between the sun and the moon. Sometimes we get a blood red moon as the Earth's shadow slowly creeps across its crater face. Depending on how things have gone in the past 6 months, we can now see the fruit blossom from the seeds we planted at the last solar eclipse. But if life has been stressful for us, putting pressure on those embryonic seeds, then what should be a birthing time can sadly turn into a miscarriage. So your personal lunar experience and how you handle the change in general, depends really on how the eclipse is configured to your chart. So you just need to, basically, it's those who are fixed signs decan 1 will get this eclipse squaring it, or conjunct or opposition, which is a hard aspect, which I think is very much an eclipse type of energy. And this will be a bit of hopefully a birthing time for me as well. I have my sun at 2 degrees Aquarius, so this is a moon that I'm hoping the promise will be kept, shall we say. Anyway, the effect of the lunar eclipse can last up to 3 months, and this can be a somber but cleansing and healing time, or a joyous or birthing time, as I just said. Eclipses get their bad reputation because humans are creatures of habit and become upset by the unexpected. So if you have been stubbornly resisting growth, you could experience the lunar eclipse as really volcanic. and the violent energy that desperately needs to be purged, though, shouldn't be dreaded. Now, lunar eclipses are extremely emotional times because this is a full moon, it's just supercharged. Now, I just realised, I think I said new moon earlier on. I always do this. I don't know why. I've got a bit of a blind spot with these moons. But anyway, it's a full moon. A lunar eclipse is a full moon. So therefore, we just really need to sit down quietly and listen to what comes up. For our feelings are our psychic barometer. So unashamedly bawl your eyes out if you have to and allow red eyes with this blood red moon. Don't fear the tears, for they are sacred, salty purification. So, although this lunar eclipse occurs in tropical Aquarius, visually it does fall in the sidereal constellation of Capricorn the Goat. So if you look up at the sky at this blood red eclipse, you will see that it does actually occur close to the goat's head in the constellation of Capricorn, if you are one of these people that actually has a telescope and actually can see the sky. The great Babylonian sky watchers assigned the following meaning for these stars. So with Jedi Prima, which is one of the ones on the goat's horns, Prima is the first one, peculiar events, unexpected losses and gains, sometimes great good fortune, and Dahib, which is at 4 degrees, the Jedi, I don't know what they're called actually, it could be Jedi, they're at the latter end of 3 degrees of Aquarius. So Dahib is successful in business but retires under a cloud, favourable for wealth, influential position, but scarcely realises ambitions, trouble through opposite sex, deserved criticism and censure. So a mixed bag there. So as I said, Jedi Prima and Jedi Secunda are the 2 stars in the right horn of Capricornus the Goat. These stars glow yellow, ash and lilac, and Capricorn is actually a sea goat with a fish's tail. He is said to be Pan, who fled to Egypt chased by Typhon. He escaped by turning his body into partly a goat and partly a fish. Hence comes a restless quality in the lives of people with this star prominent, and a mind which often changes and floats this way and that. The first half of the sign is the slave of Venus, and that with guilt involved. But a more virtuous old age is promised by the conjoining fish below. So yeah, this kind of goes with the fact that I think all Saturn-ruled signs and anyone with Saturn prominent in their chart tends to have a better time in old age, because then you've learnt all your kind of hard knock lessons, really. So Jedi Secunda, I like Jedi. I'm going to keep Jedi. Jedi Secunda is associated with piety and self-sacrifice. Now, all the stars in Aquarius Decan 1 are found in the head part of the goat, and Dahib is a Saturn, Venus-flavoured orange and sky blue star that tends to be melancholic. So, as usual nowadays, I'm doing the tarot card as well that's associated with the decan, and the one for this is the 5 of Swords. Its tarot reading is not that pleasant, and it is seen as being self-serving or as someone who profits from the anguish of others. Karmically, we have to look at this card as meaning that this decan has suffered abuse from ruthless actions and has even been possibly the perpetrator of harsh behaviour. Altair's eagle in this decan is a predator, so it's not surprising that there can be a sharp edge to this decan. And remember, Altair is actually conjunct Mars in the T-square that is in this, that's activated in this lunar eclipse. So the 5 of Swords can sometimes symbolise the overcoming of inner demons and negative mindsets. The battle fought for personal freedom would not come quickly or easily. This battle may have been a personal challenge for you, and one that others believed you could not succeed in. So that's a quote from Teach Me Tarot. I haven't actually put the link there, and I should do. Whoops, better do that. So now let's look at the aspect, which is, first of all, the eclipse is conjunct Mars, which is passionate about protection of the family and those they love. Everything is about strategy. Instincts are extra sensitive and react super fast to any outside threat. Those touched by this lunar eclipse may find themselves in the middle of emotional domestic explosions. Mothers are easily inflamed so that everyone else in the house is treading on eggshells. And this can be a workplace thing as well, like the mother hen in the workplace might be the same. At this time, we may find it hard to mellow out, even when at home and out of the war zone. Moon conjunct Mars can generally conflict just because it makes people with this aspect feel at home. So if they come from a family where the home was a violent place, this will tend to happen. And this can be a violent place that is like just mentally as well as physically. Now, Mars square Uranus makes this lunar eclipse a risk taker and a racer. The collective will feed off adrenaline and have very little patience. Mars Uranus is about having a great rapport with electrical items and having no qualms about ripping them apart if they've broken down, often risking shock. This aspect is also associated with surgery as well. So this is metaphorically as well, you know, people ripping things apart and I guess just disassembling things too, you know, order out of chaos maybe. The sharp blades of Mars combine with Uranus's sudden action, so that could stir up a national emergency. Fireworks are also symbolic of this aspect too, in the bedroom department as well as in temperament. And yes, quick tempers are easily aroused. Those touched by this lunar eclipse might jump right into a sexual relationship without much forethought during this lunar eclipse's effect, which is the next 3 months. Lunar eclipse square Uranus loves to shock and rebel against their mother country as well. And they could do this by rejecting their own culture, by marrying someone of another race, or moving to a country where they become the alien. So this brings up, I guess, questions of immigration as well, which is one of the topics that I'm always talking about. Now, Moon square Uranus needs constant change and is often nervy and electric. Those touched by this lunar eclipse will feel excited and are constantly on the verge of discovering something novel and unique. The far-out ideas are often misunderstood, and sometimes this goes as far as some people being branded with having a mental illness during the effect of this lunar eclipse. And I think later on I'm going to talk about... I was wondering what subject I was going to talk about today. I was thinking about psychology and how people get labelled by all sorts of different types of disorder, mental disorder, and also things to do with addiction as well, and whether this is really science or whether it's just pseudoscience, really. But regarding the eclipse, there's no denying that it is one of the most challenging eclipses of the year, but it's also a very brave one. The stakes are high, with so many issues that need resolving, which must be faced seriously. Any projects must be given enough time for those stubborn kinks to be ironed out, and there will have to be some short-term sacrifices for long-term gain as well. The temptation is to be far too easily dismissive, and Mars square Uranus has very little patience also. Maybe it is easier to keep searching for that greener grass rather than take on which seems to be a very complex domestic situation with oh so much baggage. However, Mars is also retrograde, which could make it more transformative and plutonic in its action. So along with Saturn's wise healing trine, there is hope that this ambitious promise could actually be delivered. Trust, composure, and persistence are needed, and inner demons will have to be faced. So as with all T-squares, once worked through, the rewards from this lunar eclipse will be well worth the effort. So let's look at what we can do for the healing meditation this time. So to help blunt those sharp edges at this eclipse, make the gods work for you by immersing yourself in this Aquarian Decan 1 energy. So as I said before, if your ascendant, sun or moon are in the fixed signs Decan 1, you actually might find it hard to curb your impulses. So to avoid just jumping straight into the deep end without due consideration, try using these materials and props for your meditation and yoga with this Aquarius Decan 1 theme. So we've got the 5 of Swords to gaze at, which might make you feel a bit depressed, but just think of them as cutting through the bullshit. Spinach to eat, which gives you iron, will help you be strong with the Mars square Uranus. Gladiolus to adorn your table, just because they're funny plants and they'll make you smile. Amber crystal to hold. Music in the key of D to listen. Benzoin, lavender and pine needles in a bath as essential oils as well. So the amber meaning, I actually put a blue amber on the as the illustration because it's just goes so well with Aquarius and it's such a lovely turquoise. But I just thought amber generally goes well with this. So it's a peacemaking stone, promotes trust. It's also a powerful yet gentle healer and cleanser. Amber draws out and transmutes negative energy of all kinds on all levels. Amber aids in physical self-healing, emotional healing of depression, and environmental clearing. It's highly protective, and amber also aids in the manifestation of ideas into reality. And that's a quote from Healing Crystals. So if you can get hold of the rarer blue and amber crystal, that form does have magical properties and can heal and transmute past hurts and traumas that you have consciously forgotten but continue to affect you subconsciously. So this is, I think it's just perfect for an eclipse, a reboot in Aquarius. So what can we talk about today? So I think, like I said, I wanted to have a look at psychology and how it may be that these definitions of what mental illnesses are nothing escapes the control grid or the matrix. So psychology isn't any different, and either is. Well, this is what I was thinking as well, are the 12-step groups as well. Now, I don't know about this. The reason that it's come sort of up is that I've had a run of readings, like every single one over the last 2 weeks pretty much has been from an ex-alcoholic or from someone who is married to one. And then also in my personal life around me, I have someone who's a friend who's also having problems with it too. So I wanted to understand it, and I did a lot of research into it as well. And obviously, when you're a astrologer and in the sort of healing modalities, you do tend to attract. It goes with the territory. It's a Neptunian thing. I actually have Mars square Neptune in my own chart, and it's funny. I'm not one of these people who has taken many. I haven't taken any psychedelics in my life. I think I took 10 mushrooms once. I was too scared to take any more, and they just made me laugh my head off. And I did enjoy it. It was just funny watching the other hippies who were really out of their heads going, woo, wah, wah. So I've never really seen anything. I've never taken anything that makes me have visions or any weird stuff like that. But, I do like a drink, and I used to smoke marijuana for quite a long time, and I gave that up in 2009. So this is one of my confessional here. Tried a few other sort of substances, but nothing big, nothing like heroin or, anything like that. I think I had half an E once. So, but I know there are people around me who've done loads of stuff, and the thing with it is hopefully you grow out of it. You tend to, because once you have kids, really, that puts an end to it. You can't be walking around, you just can't be. You can't under the influence of certain things. So, But things like alcohol, because it's so socially accepted and it's so much part of wining and dining culture. And also, I think what stopped me really going too far with it is because being Italian, it's sort of seen as something you have with your food, but to have binge drinking on an empty stomach is just weird, and I can't handle it. If I have even one glass of wine without any food in me, it's just hopeless. I can't even walk straight. So, you can't do it. So maybe it is. I think it's a kind of Northern European thing where there's this weird sort of binge drinking thing. I've noticed it in Anglo-Saxons. I've noticed it in sort of Swedish people, the Vikings. I think they used to drink before they went out to war as well. So it's a kind of uniquely Northern European thing where it becomes a problem. I don't know if it's a genetic thing. But anyway, and that's going off into a bit of a sidetrack. But the thing is, because of it, it's quite prevalent, then the wives of alcoholics, are always told they're codependent, and then they have to go to Al-Anon and they have to stand up and say, I'm a codependent. And I read a few books about this because about 10 years ago, I was going out with an alcoholic. Lasted about, 3 months or whatever. So, research, let's find out about it. Am I codependent? So I read a load of stuff about that. And then I thought, well, what's the difference between codependent and being a sort of healer? And I noticed a lot of my clients who are acupuncturists, tarot readers, they're all doing the sort of priestess work. They're all like Persephones, tend to have a partner who has some kind of addiction problem as well, or has got over that as well. So it seems to go with the territory. And then Spartan Life Coach, he's a guy on YouTube as well. He I think he did a really interesting YouTube, I'll have to link to it, about scapegoats, shamans, black sheeps in the family as well. And then that all links in with the whole narcissistic triangle that happens, the triad with also Ceres too. So all these things I always look into because it's part of the whole Persephone myth. And that all came from me looking into Lilith, which is the forbidden fruit. And the forbidden fruit is always addictions as well. And also, I have Pluto square my ascendant by about 1 minute. So it's never going to be... Oh, and Uranus, I'm that generation with Uranus-Pluto conjunct. Opposite Chiron, square my ascendant, exactly, pretty much. So... I guess I am the wounded healer, and I guess I've had some wounds from these different addicted personalities, and my own, I guess, addiction too. Because there's you can't see it really in others, or you wouldn't attract it in others if it wasn't in yourself. And of course, I've got Mars square Neptune as well. So what happens in the end, I think, with people who are priestess types is we are pretty much obsessed with fixing people, and women in particular. It is stand by your man and fix them. Now it comes to a point where you have to put that boundary and say, hang on, how much of this is stopping me? How much am I willing to self-sacrifice? And I think what happens is, it certainly happened with me. When I took up astrology full time in 2009, I didn't have time for all these kind of waifs and strays anymore. I used to attract a lot of them in my life, and you just don't have time. It's draining to give them so much attention. So it was kind of the cure for codependent relationships, actually. So then when one sort of looks like it's coming back to you, you look at it with fresh eyes and you think, am I codependent or am I just a priestess? And what sort of boundaries do I need to put up generally? So with this lunar eclipse, I think it brings up those themes because there's that T-square, and the square action will force... You'll be impatient with it. So that's the thing. So with what I was saying about the baggage, when people come along with so much baggage, do you, when is it just too much? And when does the codependency, or when does the healing rather, and the priestess work tip over to codependency? And I spoke to a friend of mine about this, and she kind of said the same thing. She said, I don't see any relationships around me that aren't codependent. And she goes, well, maybe that's because I attract them. And I thought, yeah, is it that I attract them too? When I say attract them, also, in my clients too, because obviously there's a certain type of person who's attracted to Darkstar because it's looking at the shadow. And there's a side to that's sort of pretty obsessive, really, So, and then you think, what about the whole autism thing and Asperger's? And by the way, I have done the test, and I think I'm sort of mildly that. So, and that's a kind of obsessive thing. You obsess on one thing and you put all your heart and soul into it as well. You wouldn't be really good at what you do if you didn't. So again, it's like a lot of people who are addictive personalities are often geniuses, as well. And then I thought, well, is it to do with the fact that we've lost that community connection as well? And the loss of community, because the one thing about AA that it does is it gives you that. You've got a community of people, you sit around in a circle, you talk about your problems, and that's what it's good for. And I think that's why it is successful. Like a friend of mine, oh my God, in the end she became a born-again Christian, because I know they are very Christian based, and that puts some people off. But I can't knock it, because she was really, she almost lost a child because of it. So if it can do that and get people's lives back, then I'm not going to knock it. But on the other hand, it doesn't work for some people. And then sometimes I wonder if people who are sort of middle ground, when they're not really, really, really like the sort that will just drink and never stop. When you're sort of a middle ground person, I think the labeling of I am an alcoholic isn't a good thing. I think it's a bit self-fulfilling prophecy. But without a doubt, there are people in denial, and I guess that needs to be faced. You can't slaughter your demons if you're not even willing to see that there are any. So the fact that it exists, I think, is a good thing. But I think it does probe one to question there's always been alcoholism. Alcoholism has been with us since the day the vine was invented, really. But I think what's complicated things in the modern world is other drugs as well. And you add that into the mix, and there's a hell of a lot of people out there who are opening themselves up for possession as well, because it, dissolves your psychic boundaries. And that's why there's a need for more Saturn energy, because it's an overdose of Neptune. And someone actually put, I must find this. This is also very timely. A timely comment. It's actually written quite a Neptunian way as well. The thought was, I have a question if you have time. When one has a strong Neptune, people about astrology always advise Neptune to get real and balanced in terms of dream versus reality, higher dimensions versus this world. But what about mystics or people like that? To me, you need to be pretty unbalanced. You need to be a pretty unbalanced Neptunian type to achieve to be a true mystic. But my very strong Pluto always despises too much balance, as I believe you have to have something in excess to achieve something exceptional. And that's interesting, because like what I was saying about people who have supposedly Asperger's or this kind of obsessive thing, it's just what I said earlier. I forgot they actually said that. So They said, what would you say to a person filled with Neptunian talents and called unrealistic by everyone else? Do you advocate balance and say, get real, leave those things? Or do you advocate exceptional, what the hell's that type of talents to develop even more? And then says, some part of Neptunian talents will surely die if the person gets realistic. That's my point. Well, I just answered that saying there are plenty of Neptunians with the right balance of Saturn. They're the successes. No talent will die if one gets realistic. On the contrary, it's more likely that those talents will be put in a framework that gets its message out into the normal world and thus have a chance of actually changing something rather than just dreaming it away. It's all a question of balance. That's all it is. I don't think you can lose your Neptune talents by being real, by setting boundaries. It's all, you see, the thing is, if you don't set any boundaries at all, you'll lose that. It'll just all there's a danger of it just like flooding and into nothing. Water needs to be contained. If you put water in a chalice, the chalice is the thing that's the solid thing that contains it. But if you just let those talents just, if it doesn't have a framework to sit on, then it's going to go to waste. So, and classical music, classical musicians are a really good example of Neptune-Saturn balance because they've got the music as Neptunian and Saturn is the musical notes in the framework. So yeah, that's my answer really. And with this eclipse as well, it's all about trying to get a balance. Does it have to be all or nothing? This is the thing with AA. I mean, maybe it does. And they say even one drinks too much to an alcoholic. I don't know, because I don't understand how there's no breaks. I just don't understand it. But I'm not that, so I can't tell. But maybe. I've seen Neptunians learn to put brakes on. I have seen it. So maybe it's too much to say to people that you can never drink again, or you can never even just have one bite. Because I think when it's like that, maybe it stops people who sort of need that little bit of Neptunian in their life, trying to give up at all. And because they'll think it's just going to turn into utter Saturn. It's going to turn into a prison of reality that has no spiritual side to it at all. But I guess, and this is what AA will say, won't they, is that you replace it with spirituality and find spirit find a way of plugging into that with something else. Just replace it with something else. And yeah, there's the mysticism in nature, but there's always going to be sacred herbs. There are, and maybe it's a question of finding one that isn't so demonic. And so there are other ways to handle alcoholism and addiction problems, but I won't go into that because that's just I'm not a doctor, but I know there are other ways. So I don't think it's just a question of shutting off the Neptune completely. I think there is hope that there can be a balance between the two. So actually, I just noticed that comment was left on the solar eclipse post, which I will go into next because that one's called Temptation. So maybe it'll be part 2 of this. Well, it's not a rant this week. It's a kind of mulling over and thinking out loud type of summary, I guess. All right, then. Well, that brings me to the end. I'm going to do the next one straight after this and get them done early. And I think it'll be a bit of a part 2 as well. So thanks for listening. Do come to darkstarastrology.com for your 2019 horoscopes. The 2018 are still there. They're still up. They're all free now. And that also gives you the decans for the year too. And I'm fast getting through the zodiac decans as well. I've just completed up to the end of Leo now. They're not complete, but they're a lot more complete than they were. I just haven't done Leo decan to Mercury, Venus and Mars, but all the rest is up. So yeah, that brings me to the end. All the best. Enjoy the lunar eclipse and hope your promises are kept. All the best. Bye-bye. Hi, this is Marina from Darkstar Astrology, bringing you the full moon lunar eclipse on the 27th of July, and it falls at 4 degrees of Aquarius, and it also makes a very striking T-square with Mars square Uranus. So this eclipse is going to be conjunct the fixed star Dahib in the head of the goat and Jedi, which are the two stars in the goat's horns. It speaks of a youthful tendency to live in the moment and become a slave to Venus and her tempting baubles. So when we're young, we want to gorge on all the sweets in the shop without thinking of the consequences. But when we're older, we learn the value of deferred gratification. So this eclipse makes a promise that if you do indeed make a sacrifice, then you shall be handsomely rewarded. So the T-square is activated by the lunar eclipse, and it's really sitting on a knife edge. Events occur that are just downright peculiar. The tension can push people to do something really reckless, and the risk of accidents is very high. Help is at hand with the mature and modulating trine from Saturn. Age and wisdom are the only way to rein in the fast, furious and rebellious nature of Mars square Uranus. So hopefully Saturn can tactfully steer the raw, impetuous energy of this square into something constructive. And squares are pretty constructive anyway. But do remember to put on your safety goggles. So the needy embryonic moon is not comfortable in a decan that is so much about cutting the umbilical cord to freedom. It is also one that will tend to rebel against its mother country and feel at odds in whatever home they find themselves. The moon here is constantly searching for the promised land but rarely finds it. So this lunar eclipse then is going to be really idealistic, so much so that it finds squaring its high expectations with earthly domestic reality extremely hard. However, by the end of the month, any alienation that is felt matures into great self-sufficiency. The ability to look after oneself then is in turn bestowed upon the various waifs and strays that this lunar eclipse will be attracting. So at this time, we might find ourselves providing temporary accommodation for those making difficult life transitions. A cosmic home is also found amongst other outsiders. So the meaning of a lunar eclipse in general is that it's really a super menstrual wolf howler version of a full moon, and it will do a great job of purging and releasing things from our lives that no longer serve our higher selves. The bright light of the sun throws a spotlight on our